Hey everybody, this is Dr. McVeary here. We are going to be doing a PechaFlickr session to start off my ED 106 class, New Literacies, Digital Text and Tools for New Writing. The topic, and I'm absolutely unprepared, is on the history of literacy, and I need a word from the audience. Just a word, a noun, something. Somebody give me a word. English? Another word? What? Potato? I like potato. Just because so we're going to do potato. All right, so I'm going to share my screen right now. Well, let me head over to PechaFlickr, which is just PechaFlickr.net. I'm going to search for potato. Hit play, and I'm going to have to share the screen real fast. All right, so my time is counting. Now, when we think about history of literacy, we need to think about what it means to read and write. And I define it as decoding meaning decoding and encoding meaning onto the world through a sense of agency. This idea that we use our words to control power, in a sense. Because when you think about food, when you think about reading, it really has to be a plate of choice. And it has to be balanced. Too much protein in your diet, and you're not going to eat well. And that's the same thing with reading and writing. That we had to have a balanced diet of both reading and writing. We can't consider it to be one thing. Otherwise, the plant will wither and die. And so let's think about, where did this plant born? Well, when did we start? When we go back to food, once humankind learned how to plant food in the ground, it's like, I got to figure out some way to count my cereal. I'll pick up a stick, put a notch in it, and now writing was born. Now, 100 years later, maybe it was Emily Dickinson sitting up in her attic, 900 years later, able to shape poetry. And here's poetry, the oldest genre in the world. Oldest genre in the world being created from those first bits of when we take it out, put it in there. So the blanket of what counts as reading and writing has to expand. And that's what I talk about. Is that dance? Does that dance count as a text? Somebody's encoding and decoding meaning in the world. Those dance steps have some kind of symbolic meaning. Just like those cave paintings, we were talking about that. Do those cave paintings count as text? So what fits on the plate of what counts as reading and writing is a philosophical debate. And sometimes you just have to pick it up and dip it in to reality to understand what it means. So that's why in this lecture, we're going to really look at the history of reading and writing and where it began. So when I look at the grand circle of things, of reading and writing, it is circular. In the sense that about, 10 grand thousand years ago, the actual language is put to paper, and that had a pretty good run. The cuneiform didn't come out for a long time later, and now we have cell phones. So how do we get from little scratch marks on paper and rocks and sticks to cuneiforms, to typewriters, to typeset, to word processors, to a smartphone that connects you to all the information that humankind has ever come up with? What was that journey? That's the point of this class. And we do that in the open. This class is built on the idea that we're going to explore the history of literacy in the open, which is why we're going to use tools like JS Timeline, which is an open source, open web tool. It's why we're using Hypothesis and Known and WordPress, because all of the tools that you're using to learn about literacy and are open. It's the only way knowledge can flower. When you work in the open, knowledge flowers. For too long, we tried to enclose off what counted as literacy so that only, rich white folks or priests, we controlled who could read. Because literacy is power. And if you want to open up the world to everyone, and how technical it is now getting, you need, even farming is a very technical field now. You have to think about that. So after, what happened? You have the printing press arrived about 800 years ago, maybe. My timings are probably off. And that brought in whole new flavors of writing. It democratized reading. The printing press, and yes, the Chinese did get there before Gutenberg's press, but that revolutionized because it brought the text out to the world. What was the first text published, probably? Or one of the first? The Bible. The Bible. And you know what the number one apps are on the iPad? The Bible. So, just like farming, just because the tools have changed, it's still the same basic concept. That even a potato farmer then is a potato farmer now. The goal is to make that potato. But things have shifted and changed a little bit in that global markets are now raised because that potato grown in Idaho might be this bag or whatever that's sold in Japan, China, or South Korea. I don't want to be culturally insensitive and getting that pictographic language incorrect. So it is some pictographic language somewhere not here. But that potato could be from here. That could be an Idaho potato. So the world is a network society. Going from little villages where now we're talking in Second Life to not real villages. So what brought us from 10,000 years ago to today? And that window of growth to now that we're in Second Life, well, that window's shrinking. It's like if you were to cut open a potato and look at the individual pieces and put them in a line, like a timeline, for most of human history, writing technology, literacy technology, you know, the book had a long run until when the typewriter was invented in the 1800s. That's a pretty decent chunk of time, 800 years. And then you can have farmers out in the field now podcasting. So from when that book came out, 800, you know, when the typewriter comes out, now things start to speed up. You have the telegram that comes out. Then in the 1950s or 60s, you have the word processor. Then the mainframe computer, then the personal computer. Now we're in the 70s and 80s, and the PCs. And now the internet is born, then the web is born in 94, and we can all take the world selfies everywhere. And we can just pollute our world with nonsense useless selfies. But think about the time frames. Literacy tools used to last for this long. Now they're changing this fast. From the moment you get to the beach to when you sit down at the dinner table, a new tool has probably come out. So old tools for literacy aren't supplanting more efficient ones, they're coexisting. You know, it's like you have to be able to get through it and build on layers of flavor when it comes to literacy tools now. You need to be able to read, write, and participate on the web. Otherwise, you're in for a lane of cheese. And because you will, I mean, it's almost in the sense that you, to be alive, in the sense you do need to be a little bit digital. Now, it is important to unplug. I believe there's a big difference between being present and building up your web presence. And we're going to talk in this class that you need to have separate buckets for those techniques. And part of those buckets are your identities. Because the history of literacy is also a history of identity. Because the words that you use are words that you use to shape your lives. And it's words you project out in identity, and people project an identity back onto you. Thank you, everyone. That was my lecture on potatoes. Oh, and what? How do I get the potato in there? Well, this is a tool. Let me just turn this off real fast.
Proud or mad?
Of what? Proud and mad. What do you mean? Well, you can be a little bit proud and mad because you guys get to do the same thing later this year. But you're going to get to pick your slides. It won't be a PechaFlickr slide where you do. So what it is a tool called PechaFlickr. It is by a friend of mine named Alan Levine. And you type in a word into the tool, and it then just pops up 20 slides and auto advances them in 20 seconds. So that is pretty much how it works, and that's the history of literacy as compared to potato by interweb.